Hi class, Jolene here. So we're going to take a look at previous student examples of the greeting card assignment. So this is where you're going to start your assignment with this template called Lesson 1 Greeting Card Template. And this is where you're going to put all your work. So you can see here we have a page for your brainstorm. This is where you're just going to make a list of ideas of the different types of greeting cards you might create. Could be a Valentine's card, a Halloween card, etc. And then over here on this page where it says roughs, this is where you're going to start um, drawing simple shapes that go with some of the ideas that you have over here on the brainstorm page. So for instance, if you were going to make a Valentine's card, you might create some hearts or some chocolate candies or symbols that represent Valentine's Day. Over here is where you're going to have your two comps. These are two 4x6 rectangles. This is where you're going to put two different compositions of the front of the card using one of the symbols that you created up here. And this is going to make more sense once I start showing you the examples. Then once you've finished these two comps, you're going to take the one you like the best, you're going to copy it and put it over here for the front of your card. And then you're going to create the inside of that card to match. So let's take a look at what other students have done. Here's an example of a brainstorm. I'll make this a little bigger so you can see here. She's got happy birthday, and then next to it she made a list of the types of symbols that come to mind when you think about a happy birthday card. Cake, balloons, gift box, party hats, etc. So this is a really good way of creating your brainstorm. Then you come over to the second page, and this is where you start creating your shapes, your roughs. And it's also where you're going to do your type trials. And there's going to be another video on how to, precisely how to do type trials. And so I'll show you that more later. But one thing that's not so good about this one is you should have at least 6 shapes, geometric shapes, and then 6 different versions of that shape. So if you're going to make a heart, what are the different ways you could make a heart? You could make it very geometric. You could cut another heart out of part of it. You could make it more abstract. You could make them different colors. There's lots of different ways you can do that. So make at least 6 shapes and then make variations of those shapes. Then here's where the comps are. So this person has decided on doing Halloween, a Halloween card, and created 2 different comps. The problem with this is that your comps should use the same symbol or symbols on both cards. So this is like 2 completely different things. So I'll show you examples of ones that work well. But for instance, if this person was going to use these shapes should also be included in this one with a different composition. Moving over to this page, this person chose this comp for their final. So there's the front page, and then the verse or the phrase that goes inside the card. Now, what goes inside the card should match the outside of the card. This doesn't really match at all. We've got kind of a bright green here. The type is different. We've got red here. Maybe use some of the elements you used on the outside on the inside so it looks cohesive. It looks like they go together. Let's take a look at another one. Again, a nice list of ideas with some symbols that go along with them. This page of roughs is there should be a lot more experimentation here. Like I said before, 6 different shapes done, I think 6 different. Let me correct myself on that. 6 different shapes with 3 variations of each one. So there should be more than that here. And there should be a bunch of type trials here also. You'll see pages coming up with type trials. Now, let's talk about what's wrong with this page. The reason we're seeing this type with the pink rectangles around it is because this person did not create outlines on their type. There's a tutorial for that in this module, so make sure that you take a look at that tutorial for creating type. The reason it comes out like this is because I don't have the same font that this student used on their type. And so Illustrator just substitutes something. So it will make your design look odd and incorrect, not what you intended. But again, these are the 2 comps, and then this is the front. This isn't working right either because this front here for the final should be one of the 2 comps. This person created a third one. Create 2 comps, choose one, copy it, and move it over here, and then create an inside that goes with it. All right, here's one that's working pretty well. We've got the brainstorm. I think you're getting a feel for that. There again should be more roughs and lots more type trials. Make sure you watch the video on how to create type and how to do type trials. But here's a pretty good example of comps. Not sure why the words are not spelled out. Oh, I see. It's answered over here. So here's a comp. They've added a background color, and then here's the inside. Notice all these blue lines all over. You've probably seen it in several of the other trials. Those are guides. I've provided a tutorial on how to create guides. And you can see that as is in the instructions, you will be asked to create 1/4 inch guides on your 2 comps and on your final and your inside 4x6 rectangles. So that's what these guides are. And the idea of the guides is to keep everything that's crucial within, so in the center of those guides. So for instance, you would not want this type to go right there. It's outside the guide. Now there's times when you might deliberately put your design something like this. Maybe you want to make it really big and have it deliberately bleed off of the picture plane. This 4x6 is considered the picture plane, and you've done that deliberately. That's fine. But otherwise, make sure that everything stays within those guides, except your background color. That's perfectly normal and acceptable to go right to the edges of that 4x6. Here's another one. You'll see the guides all over the place. As you'll see in the tutorial, you can easily turn those guides off by toggling with the control semicolon. So I'll turn them off so you can see better. This is a pretty good example of lots of different rough shapes, and then type trials. And this is a perfect example of 2 comps using the same symbols. So you can see here, here's this symbol made smaller with a few other objects added to it, and then the same symbol over here made much larger. The scale is much larger. Also notice 2 different types, 2 different fonts. So that's where your experimentation comes in. You're making the same card with the same symbols and the same words composed differently. This student chose this comp for their final and then added the inside to match. So notice that the colors, the feeling are the same in this one. That works really well. Here's another one. Again, there should be more roughs. Let's take a look. I'm going to toggle those guides off. Very good example of two comps using the same symbol. One's over on the right side with a little the stem coming in diagonally, and over here is the same symbol of the owl, much larger and not on an angle. Let's turn those guides back on. Uh-oh, problem with these with what's happening here. Kind of okay for this symbol to go a little bit outside the guide, but the type should definitely be inside. So that should look more like, if you want to make it large but stay inside the guides, something like that. Now this one, what I mentioned earlier, bleeding off, this is perfectly fine, but if you're going to bleed something off of the picture plane, bleed it all the way off. Later on, we'll be learning how to create clipping masks so that you clip that edge out of there. But for now, it's fine to do it just like this. And this student did the right thing in taking this comp, copying it, moving it over here for the front, and then using a similar theme inside. The hoot works really well. I think you are a hoot, I should say, inside the little kind of candy hearts. That works really well. This is a good example of lots of different hearts done in the same way. The cup done several different ways. That's what I mean by creating a rough and then 3 variations of it. Turn the guides off so we can see this better. Another example of not creating outlines on the type. The type that this student used probably looked really stylized in both cases. See, I can tell that this isn't, in 2 ways I can tell that it hasn't, outlines haven't been created, because I can edit this type. You cannot edit type that outlines have been created on. Plus I can see those rectangles there, so I know that hasn't happened. But again, good examples of comps using the same symbols done in composed in 2 different ways, and then carrying one of those over to the front. And this is a really good example of the inside matching the outside. Oh, by the way, there was a misspelled word in that last one. I meant to point that out. Make sure you do a spell check. You can check your spelling right here under the edit menu and then check spelling. You've got to select the words first, select the type, and you need to select it before you've created outlines, because again, once you create outlines on type, it's a vector graphic. It's no longer type that Illustrator can recognize. This is a really good example of what your type trials should look like. You know what your words are going to be, create them, copy them, try a different font. I'll be demonstrating this again, but notice that this type has been copied and set off to the side outside the artboard, so that if you notice a mistake somewhere, you can go back and grab this type and fix it. And edit it. This is not editable anymore because this is type that outlines has been created on. So this is what the type should look like. This is a good example of that. Again, 2 different comps. two different ways of doing it. In this case, they didn't use the same symbol. Here we have a man in uniform saluting. Here we have the stars. It should be the same, but done in different ways. But then this is a good way of using both those symbols for the inside and the outside. Good example of roughs done in several different ways. So this person has created a vase and then colored it in different ways of doing hearts, Easter eggs. That's a good example. Comps, not a good example. Two completely different things. One's Valentine's Day and one's Easter. Completely different. So this should have done Valentine's Day with these symbols on this one, but composed in a different way. Here's the final and the inside to match. All right, I'll make this the last one because I think you're probably getting a feel for this. Here's another way of doing brainstorms if some people are really visual, and it helps to categorize things and make them a different color, makes it easier to see as you're coming over to start your roughs. Again, this is a good example of type trials for not only the headline that goes on the front, but the type that goes on the inside. The type choices are really important on the outside and the inside. So you can see that this person's experimenting with different types of fonts for the inside. You want it to be not only readable, but relevant to the theme that you're creating. If it's a Halloween theme, maybe you want it to be a little bit scary. If it's a Valentine's card, maybe you want it to be a little fancier like this. But regardless of which one you choose, make sure that it is readable. Again, these comps are kind of two different things, and then there's a third thing over here. So create just two compositions using the same headline and same elements, composed two different ways, copy one, move it over to the front, and then create an inside that complements the outside.